I was initially determined to stay out of this Jada Pinkett Smith conversation, but now y'all got me like Al Pacino in Godfather 3.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
So here I am fucking bothered about the ridiculous backlash that Jada Pinkett Smith has received while promoting her new memoir, Worthy, which hit stores last week. Now, before I go any further, let me divulge a few important qualifiers that you should absorb as you consider this opinion. 1, I wrote a memoir. Came out last year. It's called Uphill. In fact, the paperback just came out 2 weeks ago, and it's available wherever books are sold. Now, when my memoir was first released last year, I also went on an extensive publicity campaign and book tour, so I can speak to what it's like promoting a memoir. 2, I've appeared on Red Table Talk twice, which includes as recently as last year. When you record Red Table Talk, you spend a lot of time on set with the hosts, Jada, Gammy, and Willow, as in a few hours. And the last time I was on the show, Will Smith popped up to say hello to me and my mother, and we talked at length. Now, I'm not saying I'm friends with the Smiths, though true story, my mother actually asked them to adopt her. But I was around them enough to know that they came off as decent, genuine, compassionate people. Definitely not assholes. 3, I've not only read Jada's memoir, but also read Will's, which was sensational. Highly recommend, especially the audio version, because Will voices it and it's so good and worth your time. Now, the last couple of weeks, Jada has been subjected to a lot of criticism. Some people are turned off because they feel like Jada is sharing too much and making Will look bad.
At one time, we thought Will Smith and Jada was Shaq and Kobe, just on some, red carpet, let's get this money type shit. But how Jada Pinkett Smith moving, it don't make you want to really be that close with a woman. It'll really make you reconsider ever being married.
My former colleague, Stephen A. Smith, also had some thoughts, which he shared on his YouTube show.
She writing books. She talking about how y'all weren't together for the last 7 years. She talking about how sex wasn't really an option with y'all. She got her children craving for Tupac's resurrection. She damn near talked about your lack of an erection.
Now, I can confirm that in those 400 pages, no mention of Will Smith's erection, and that felt very weird to say. To quote Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And Jada has now firmly become the villain in her own story. Now, for all the people who seem to be so bothered by a celebrity promoting their own memoir, this is kind of how it works. Usually the juiciest tidbits come out first because that's what the media wants to focus on. It drives clicks, it drives ratings. Most importantly, it helps the celebrity sell books. When I was promoting Uphill, nobody asked me about my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Gold, or what it was like living in Raleigh, North Carolina in the late 90s. Instead, I was asked repeatedly about leaving ESPN. I was also asked about my public beef with Donald Trump and how I felt about the White House saying I deserved to be fired. I was asked a lot about my mother's drug addiction. The point is to ask me the questions that make you go, oh shit, I want to buy that book. Britney Spears' book is dropping this week, and People magazine already has been publishing excerpts. So they have a post about Britney Spears basically every damn day, which is the same thing they did with Jada Pinkett Smith. With Britney, we already know she was impregnated by Justin Timberlake and decided to have an abortion. She details her nasty custody fight with Kevin Federline and shares how her father body shamed her, and under the conservatorship, he even had monitored her birth control. The whole point of a memoir is to share and to let people in on your journey. In my memoir, I shared that I had an abortion because I wanted people to understand that every woman who has an abortion isn't doing so because of trauma. Sometimes it's about the fact you don't want a child. The truth is, how people receive the information shared by a celebrity in a memoir isn't about whether or not that person shared too much. Often it's about whether they like the celebrity. When Michelle Obama was promoting her book, The Light We Carry, she said, quote, she couldn't stand her husband, former President Barack Obama, for about a decade. I don't recall anyone accusing Michelle Obama of emasculating her husband. Nobody complained that she was sharing too much. Why? Because we love Michelle Obama. Will and Jada have been in the spotlight for decades, and when it comes to discussing the not so pretty parts of their marriage, they have both said a lot of the same things. When Will was promoting his memoir in 2021, he sat down with Oprah Winfrey and described their marriage or separation this way.
We never actually officially separated, right? What happened was we realized that it was a fantasy illusion that we could make each other happy. And we agreed that she had to make herself happy and I had to make myself happy. And then we were going to present ourselves back to the relationship already happy versus demanding that the other person fill our empty cup.
So we already knew there was a separation, but Jada clued us in on the details of the separation. We didn't know when it started, when it ended, if it ended, but here's how she explained the separation.
I feel like you're a straight talker.
I am.
Except you're not sometimes.
Yeah.
So why do that? Like, what was the reason?
I think just not being ready yet. Still trying to figure out between the two of us how to be in partnership, right? And in regards to how do we present that to people, you know? And we hadn't figured that out.
Why did the relationship fracture?
Oh, well, why it fractured, that's a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think by the time we got to 2016, we were just exhausted with trying. I think we were both kind of still stuck in our fantasy of what we thought the other person should be.
Now in Worthy, Jada goes into greater detail about this. And as I wrote this week in my column for The Atlantic, Pinkett Smith willingly accepts responsibility for some of the trouble in her marriage. She says she made the mistake of neglecting her mental health to the point of experiencing intense depression and constant suicidal thoughts. At no point in this book does she say this is all Will's fault. She discusses her responsibility, their personality difference, and how their individual struggles contributed to the fracture in their relationship. Jada is candid about battling that intense depression to the point where it even led her to try experimental therapy with medicinal psychedelics. She is very accountable for how she often placed unfair expectations on Will. Y'all forget that these two got married when Jada was 26 and pregnant with their first child, Jaden. When she mentioned that she cried walking down the aisle, she explains she was full of emotion, joy, fear, wondering if she'd be able to make Will happy, a range of different feelings. Shocking! I realized after it became known that Jada had a relationship with singer August Alsina, a lot of people were just out on her, period. But let me remind you, the reason we knew about that entanglement is because of August Alsina, not because of Jada Pinkett Smith. So many of y'all wanted to paint this woman like a modern day Jezebel, when her and Will were living separate lives, as in so separately they weren't even living together. As they both have said, Will knew what was happening and when it was happening. There was no lies, no deception. They have both said they don't consider it cheating. Psst. And Will was also free to live his life however he wanted. As for Will's appearance on Red Table Talk, this is exactly how it was written in her memoir. When I told Will what I was planning to do, he, by his own choice, without any prompt or request from me, decided to join me at the table. Frankly, I was surprised, pleasantly so. Considering we weren't together and given where we were sitting in our relationship at the time, that was unexpected. But he suggested that he did not want me to go to the table alone. When Black women share and voice their pain, their trauma, their frustrations, it's sometimes met with skepticism, disdain, and contempt. The message that is sometimes sent to Black women is just shut up and prioritize everybody else's needs above your own, even if it comes at your own expense. The world is so used to us shrinking ourselves that when we don't, it's considered an act of betrayal. Now, Will didn't deserve any smoke for what he shared in his memoir. But I can't help but notice that I didn't hear all this pearl clutching over him admitting that he fell in love with his co-star from 6 Degrees of Separation when he was still married to his first wife. Nobody called him low down. It was simply a part of his larger story and journey. The irony is that the public continuing to paint Will Smith as the victim, or like he's some kind of hostage, is more emasculating than anything you think Jada has done to him. So what? She discussed Tupac in her book and has discussed him over the years. They grew up together, and he just so happened to become one of the most important rappers in hip-hop history. Is she supposed to not answer questions about him? Pretend they weren't as close as they were? They had a lot in common because they both had mothers struggling with addiction. They both were in the Baltimore streets. She has said repeatedly she had no romantic feelings for Tupac, and while she has divulged in her memoir that Pac asked her to marry him, as she wrote in her book, she understood what that was really about. She wrote, "I knew what this was. He needed solid footing. I had been that for him through so much. But what he really needed was someone to do time with him, and I had planned on doing so as a friend." What my spidey senses are detecting isn't the emasculation of Will Smith, but the projection of everyone else, mixed in with a little bit of insecurity. What's really bothering some of y'all and causing you to resent and dislike Jada is that Will still supports her, despite the mess, despite the flaws, despite the entanglement. Total help me sing.
We ride together,
We die together.
Bad marriage for life.
Some might argue that's what marriage, to an extent, that's what it's about. Hence why they say the for better or worse part and not just the for better part? One thing that I have learned after 4 years of marriage, and I really knew this before, but it's even more crystal clear now. Everybody's marriage is truly custom made. What works for somebody else's marriage might not work for yours. Will and Jada's marriage is custom made, and as it turns out, so is their separation, or whatever season they find themselves in. And by the way, are we gonna pretend we don't know people who are married, living separate lives, but never divorcing? Oh, that's just me. Sure it is. Will Smith is not a victim. Jada Pinkett Smith is not a villain. After reading their respective memoirs, my conclusion is very simple. Both of these humans are perfectly flawed, and weirdly, kind of makes them right for each other. Stay unbothered.